Hey, welcome to Planet Earth. It's Friday and you made it. And the best way to kick off the weekend is to talk about some history, some dinosaurs, and some football. Mr. H here with you. We're just cruising along because, well, really got nothing else better to do. So I just thought I'd hang out with you, huh? Lucky you. We're going to talk about the Korean War today, 1950 to 1953. This is called the Forgotten War because, you run a list of American wars. This is the one they always forget. So it started in 1950. The major fighting was over in 1951. They spent 2 years of an unsteady ceasefire before signing a permanent armistice. So some people say it never actually ended. I don't know. It's just a really brutal, vicious kind of war that no one really expected to get into. So it's not only the forgotten war; it's the unexpected war too. Now it started on a nice, calm summer day on June 25th, 1950, when North Korea suddenly invaded South Korea. North Korea claims they were attacked first by South Korea, but South Korea's military is approximately 900,000 soldiers on a good day, very few tanks, about a dozen airplanes, no artillery. This North Korean army smashing into them was already about 135,000. The latest Soviet technology at the time, they got the T-34 tanks, some leftover Soviet stuff. So they come swarming over the border. They figure it's going to be over pretty fast. And why wouldn't they think that? South Korea, as we've already stated, has no army. Here's how South Korea is going to bolster their forces. Yeah, the 98,000 poorly trained soldiers, they got the student volunteer force. Yeah, they were told that they would fight and be back in time for classes. Guess what, man? Not going to turn out that way. That's a metaphor for the Korean War. Nothing turned out the way anyone thought it would for anybody involved. So the United States gets mixed up in it. They sent in Task Force Smith. They thought the President of the United States Army, 5 years removed from its great triumph in the Second World War, would stop the North Koreans. Only problem is the U.S. Army of 1950 is not the same force it was from 1945. Task Force Smith, a bunch of soldiers they gathered together from occupation duty in Japan, sent right into the teeth of the North Koreans. It did not work out too well for the U.S., though they did bloody the North Korean nose just a little bit. But still, it's an occupation force, bunch of conscripts, and a soft billet in Japan. This isn't the same as going to Korea, where you're fighting a North Korean army that's well organized and has experience from fighting against the Japanese and in the Chinese Civil War as well. So the North Korean tide is rolling forward. The United States has now gotten involved and they've gotten off to a bad start. Kind of like how the Steelers lost on opening day. Will they turn it around? Stay tuned, find out. So as you can see, the North Koreans are attacking full speed, trying to end this thing before anybody can do anything. That would be their strategy today if they actually started another war. So the United States is putting all their forces down in Busan, down there in the southeast corner of the Korean Peninsula. It's the main port. The North Koreans have overrun Seoul. They've overrun most of the country. And so the United States, along with help from 15 other nations in the UN, including Greece, are hanging on to that southeast corner, trying to figure out if they're going to counterattack. Well, they could go straight in the teeth of the North Koreans. They're tired. Their equipment's been chewed up. But if there's one thing you notice about Korean topography, it's all hills, man. It's like Battle of Thermopylae every 3 feet. So they come up with an idea. Instead of going head first into the North Koreans and drive them back, let's land in the rear and cut across the back of that army. That's where the Incheon landing comes up. See it there on the west central part near Seoul? So the U.S. Marine Corps, they're going to land right there and push in and cut off the South Koreans, rather North Koreans. And guess who's leading the charge? Yep, we got our friend Doug MacArthur. He's had nothing really to do. He's been running Japan lately, had that big victory in the Pacific. He's going on here for the hat trick. We're going to try and take on the North Koreans, drive them back. So we talked about the Incheon landing. See the blue thing in the southeast? UN's hanging on to that. So now we go into Incheon. The small blue arrow is going to get a lot bigger. They're going to land there. They're going to cut across the back of the North Korean army and choke them off, right? Maybe turn them around, cut off the supplies. The North Korean army is pretty beat up already. U.S. airstrikes have been hammering them left and right. They can't break into that triangle down there, or a rectangle. So this thing should be over really quick, right? September 1950. So that's a really cool picture. The Marines hit the beach there. The Marines, unlike the Army, still have quite a few veterans from the last war, so they got that good iron core right there. It's like a pair of brass knuckles, right? You got the brass knuckles in the fist, so it drives everything else. So even new guys learn real fast. They land at Incheon. They swim their way into Seoul, and the North Korean army is about to fall apart. Now it starts retreating. Drive them back. Now here's a little bit of a problem. Where do we drive them back to? Do we drive them right back to the 30th parallel? That would save South Korea. That's the mission, save South Korea. And then Doug MacArthur, being a American general, wants to see this thing to the end. No half measures. He says the best way to save South Korea is to completely destroy North Korea. And North Korea is starting to fall apart. Their army's disintegrating. They're starting to surrender en masse. Shouldn't take too long to drive your way up to the Yalu River. It is September, and it tends to get kind of cold in Korea, so you might want to think this thing through. Nonetheless, they drive forward. Up over the border they go. They've chased all the North Koreans back. They're in North Korea. They take the North Korean capital, Pyongyang, over there. They're driving, and by Thanksgiving of 1950, they are within sight of the Yalu River. This thing is going to be over by Christmas. China is getting a little bit concerned here. They don't want to see the U.S. Army camped out on its border. They're a communist country too. Save a fellow communist nation. I don't know, man. It's looking kind of tough. They gave a few warnings to the U.S. They had a couple minor attacks on U.S. forces and then backed off. So it's kind of the warning. And Doug MacArthur, claiming to be, ready for this, an expert on the quote-unquote Oriental mind, says the Chinese are not going to attack. Which is, quite a big gamble considering you're not the one on the front line, Doug. So as you can see, China's pretty big. The UN has a policy of not expanding the war. First it was South Korea, then it's North Korea. When the Chinese finally come in with 300,000, if not more, soldiers smashing into the teeth of the United States Army and driving it back, MacArthur naturally wants to start bombing China, so that would simply spread the war. The U.S. Air Force, now it exists, and the Navy with their air power has just decimated North Korea. They want to turn it loose on China. They can only attack the Chinese and North Korea. That means those bridges across the Yalu River only hit the Korean side of the bridge. It's kind of hard to do, and yes, some shots go flying over into China, which only makes the Chinese mad. And we have a full-scale intervention with the world's largest nation population-wise is attacking the U.S. Army in North Korea. This war has taken a turn nobody saw coming. It's getting worse. This is the Chinese version of the whole thing. There they are, chasing the Americans back. And they did for a while. They actually cut off a large American force up there at the Chosun Reservoir and tried to annihilate it. The only thing that happened was the Chinese force doing the attacking, they're the ones that got annihilated. Chosun Reservoir, look at it, borderline Siberian conditions. It's so cold. It was so cold that soldiers who would have bled to death actually survived because their wounds froze. That's how cold it was. American airstrikes just pounding the daylights out of the Chinese, got the tanks, got machine guns, got technological advantage over them, mowing down the Chinese in rows. The Chinese just kept coming in these human wave attacks, like the demons and elf stones of Shannara. They just keep coming forward. The machine gun barrels began to melt. Yeah, that's how many Chinese are coming at them. And they're forcing the Americans back. They try to crush the Marines, surround and crush them at the Chosun Reservoir. Doesn't work. The Americans fight their way out. Not only because of the air support and good training, it's also the attitude. Chesty Puller, look at that. He's the general in charge of the Marines right there at that point when they're trapped in Chosun. He says, they're on our right, they're on our left, they're in front of us, and they're behind us. They won't get away from us this time. Attitude like that, you're never, ever going to lose. And I've always liked Chester Pulley because he's the puller. He's the kind of guy who doesn't worry about parade ground stuff, right? I mean, look at this. Take me to the brig. I want to see the real Marines, Just remember, the best soldiers aren't the guys who look good on the parade ground. The best soldiers are the guys who look like they just robbed a liquor store. Yes, that's been proven. West Point. Also, the B-29 Stratofortress. You saw what that thing did in the Second World War. Ask the Japanese about it. So it's carrying over 2 tons of bombs and dropping it down on the Chinese. Surprising precision for 1950 and that high up. And just annihilating the Chinese left and right so the Marines can get out of there. The U.S. and UN forces are retreating. They actually get pushed back below the 38th parallel again. The Chinese take Seoul, meaning the second time that city has fallen. And Doug loves this B-29 Stratofortress because not only does it bomb the living daylights out of the enemy, it's got another talent. Yeah, remember that? Hiroshima and Nagasaki dropped 2 A-bombs. So he wants to use the atomic bomb against the Chinese, and not just in Korea. He wants to hit them in China. This is a really wild escalation, all right? Because if they start hitting the Chinese with nuclear weapons, maybe the Russians, their ally with nuclear weapons, join in. And I don't think people truly understood what an atomic bomb was. For some reason, I think Doug MacArthur just under the impression it was a big bomb, even though he had 5 years to look at it in Japan. But that's how they were thinking. And he really wanted to turn it loose, but, civilian control of the military. President Truman says, no, I don't think we're going to do that. And there's the enemy that Doug cannot beat. He beat the Japanese. He's beating the Chinese. They're pushing him back, but he can push him. He knows it. And here's the guy he can't beat. Truman decides not to use an atomic bomb on the Chinese. He used it twice on the Japanese already, so he has a pretty good idea what this thing is and what it can do. Doug MacArthur, he didn't get along with Truman. He wants to win the war. He wants to push the Chinese back and over to Yalu and go all the way to Beijing. That's just not going to happen in 1950 and 51. Eventually, they just kept disagreeing on strategies, and MacArthur got fired. Yep, the president can fire a general, even like MacArthur. So they bring in Ridgway. They use superior firepower and air power to push the Chinese and what's left of North Koreans back. They take Seoul back the second time. They push them over the border back into North Korea. So remember that propaganda poster you saw there with the Chinese pointing at the Americans to leave? Yeah, that's what they use back home. Over here on the right, this is what's happening, right? Chinese are finally, they've gotten the daylights bombed out of them. Their supply lines are stretched out. They're starting to starve to death. So you're starting to get tons of prisoners. Doesn't mean we're going to chase them all the way back to the Yalu River. But South Korea, yeah, we're going to chase them out of South Korea. And we're going to bite off a hunk of North Korea while we're at it. And there we are. You see the 38th parallel? Well, South Korea is a little bit larger. Yeah, I lost a little piece over there to the west. But look at the east, right? Got a nice chunk out of that. So at the end of the day, they stop at an armistice line, 1951. They spent a couple of years just being obnoxious at the negotiating table. But that's the line where it is today, and it's going to remain there for the foreseeable future. So the Korean War went all kinds of ways nobody on either side expected. And hopefully we don't see another one of those. Hey, what do you think of this? What do you think that is? Go ahead. Take a guess. Do you know that's what they originally thought the Stegosaurus looked like? Yeah, Stegosaurus. And then they finally got a little bit closer as they found more fossils, and they came up with this idea. I have no idea what this is supposed to be a picture of exactly. Why are the people running from a Stegosaurus who's apparently climbing up a hill and has human-like legs? More I think about this guy could be a pretty good running back for the Steelers, just in case. Just, might want to bring him in for a tryout, not hurting anything. Well, they discovered Stegosaurus in about 1877 or so. There's some confusion on the dates because they're just bones where they start putting them together. Around 1911, they came up with the classic Stegosaurus. This is what they pretty good idea of what it looked like, though it's not completely perfect. You see it's got a small head, very short neck. You see the plates and definitely the tail over there. We'll get to that in a second. This is what they originally thought the classic Stegosaurus looked like for about 80 years or so. So sometime around the 80s, there's some more pictures there. You see he's got that same look. Small head, short neck, Got that big hump right there in the middle. That's what they thought it looked like. But sometime I learned out in the 80s, they started, when we learned more and more about dinosaurs and the dinosaur renaissance. And in the 90s, when you had AOL and everybody was able to come up with computer generations for that era, they started taking a look at the skeleton. They looked at the bones and how they came together, and they think that the tail was actually lifted, walking with the tail, and that it may have had a longer neck. And I definitely agree with the longer neck. And yeah, I think it might have carried the tail, though maybe it did drag it as well. But definitely had a longer neck, and we'll get to why I say that in a second. But the thing with Stegosaurus, the roofed lizard, is one thing everybody notices, right? That A, it's pretty big. Look at this thing. Not 4 meters by 9. In case you're not familiar with metric, that's 12 by 27 feet. There's a human being 6 feet standing underneath. So Stegosaurus could probably walk right through you and not even know you were there. So that's one thing everybody notices, how big this thing is. They also notice the spikes on the tail, right? The official name is a thagomizer. Yep, thagomizer. Fancy word for big bone spear. On the tail, it can really hurt. And there was a debate over what these were. Some people thought that they were simply ornamental. Maybe the plates on the back, perhaps, but not that thing. That's clearly a weapon. And they said, well, how could he use it? Well, it's pretty simple. It's on the tail. Swing the tail. Think about it, man. Especially if it's in an elevated position like that. There's Allosaurus trying to get around the back. Maybe he'll get there, maybe not, but you see he's got speared in the tail over there. And that's why I think the long-necked Stegosaurus is accurate, because if it has a short neck, can't see where it's swinging and can't aim. With a long neck, you can turn your head around and see where to swing. I also look of fear on his face. So I think that the 80s on up depiction of the Stegosaurus is actually more accurate. Now, what's up with these plates? A lot of people asking about that. Stegosaurus roofed lizard. The reason it's called roofed lizard is because they originally thought those plates were like growing on the back, not standing up, but rather laying down. So it's kind of like a tortoise shell. The problem with that is, one, didn't have enough plates and they didn't fit going across the back. And secondly, those plates, even if they were plates, they're clearly separate items. So any predator, if he tries to hug the ground like an ankylosaurus, any predator is going to get his claws between those plates and dig in between them. So that's not up. Plus, they found kind of almost like slots in the backbone. So yeah, they do fit there. There's some debate over whether or not there were 1 row or 2 rows, even 3. Some people think maybe the plates were flat on the back and stood up when it was under attack or something. Could have been a mating display. So a number of reasons. Other people hearken back to Dimetrodon and think it's maybe to help heat the animal up. Remember the sail on the Dimetrodon? But it definitely had those things. But the thing we're most interested in is that spiked tail. Clearly a weapon. There's no other reason for that. Mother Nature doesn't waste time on ornaments. A lot of people asking, what happens when T-Rex goes against Stegosaurus? I'll tell you what happened. Nothing happened. It didn't exist at the same time. Stegosaurus, 155 million to 145 million years ago. T-Rex, 70 million years. That's almost 70 million year difference between the two. That's a long time, man. And you want to hear something that really freak people out? You ready for this? Do you realize we are as close to T-Rex time-wise than T-Rex was to Stegosaurus? Yeah, Stegosaurus is further away on the timeline from T-Rex than we are to T-Rex. Yeah, we're closer. That's terrifying, isn't it? Yeah, people don't understand time. They always assume all prehistoric animals lived fairly close to each other on the timeline. They don't realize how long and how vast. Human beings, you know what percentage of time we've been on this planet? 0.01. Yeah, if you put on a timeline, they have to actually expand the time Homo sapiens have been here so you can actually see it. And this is something I use to kind of freak out my class sometimes. This very example, T-Rex and Stegosaurus. Do you know that our current civilization, if you want to call it that, is closer to the Roman Empire than the Roman Empire ever was to the pyramids construction? Yeah, the pyramids were allegedly constructed in 2500 BC. Not really sure, but it's a good date, it seems like. And that is 2,500 years away from the birth of the Roman Empire, whereas we, in the year of 2023, are 2023 years away from the birth of the Roman Empire. So we're closer to the Roman Empire than the Roman Empire ever was to the pyramids. See, everybody hears ancient history and they assumed all this stuff happened fairly close to each other, one thing behind the other. Yeah. Have I blown your mind yet? let me blow it up some more. Look at that, the Santillo Dinosaurs, the League of American Football down in Mexico. This is a Mexican football team called the Dinosaurs, and look at that. They've got a Stegosaurus ridge on both sides of their helmet. Long ago, far away in the dark ages, when I was in high school, I had to write a creative writing exercise once, and I created a team called the Dayton Dinosaurs. And their helmet actually had the word dinosaurs in the arc and a theropod in the middle of the helmet. Yeah, so I think they owe me some money here on a copyright. I don't know. I'll get back to that later on. But hey, Santillo Dinosaurs, if I'm looking for a favorite team in Mexico, that's it. And I actually believe they're playing for the League of American Football Championship down in Mexico. Now, speaking of more foreign football, ever hear of the European League of Football? Yeah, ELF. They've been playing for 3 years now. I've been keeping up with them. I don't really have a favorite team. I'm a fan of the entire league. Yeah, I know there's no team in Greece. And there's another picture of a guy jumping. I seem to like jumping pictures for some reason. The guy jumping is with the Rhine Fire. Yep, same name from the NFL Europe. Jumping over a guy from the Stuttgart Surge. The Stuttgart Surge, a really good team at 12-2, defeated an undefeated team, right, earlier to get there, and now the Rhine Fire, the Frankfurt Galaxy, and now we got the Rhine Fire, another undefeated team. They played for the championship over in Germany, and Rhine won 53-34. So Stuttgart put up a good fight, but not quite enough. European League of Football, 3 years they've been playing there. I would cover it a little more deeper, but I try to keep these podcasts under a half an hour. Now let's talk about quote-unquote real football. Yeah, right here in the U.S. Our Steelers knocked off somebody's Raiders 23-18. Offense looked really good. Defense did a great job, but before we crowned them Super Bowl champions already in week 3, and they're doing a good job at 2-1, first place. Remember, the Raiders were able to move against the Steelers, but on the other hand, the Steelers' offense suddenly came to life and scored 23 points. That's enough for a win. You got good defense. You don't have to score a lot. And there's the two guys that were responsible there. We've got Pickett, who managed to stay upright and throw the ball, not just those little 10-yarders. He threw a 72-yard touchdown and was pretty mobile in the pocket. Get out of trouble. It's not going to make you forget Michael Vick, but, at least the guy doesn't stand there like a statue. But enough about the great victory over the Raiders. Let's talk about who's up next, the Houston Texans. Last time we played the Texans, we beat them. Yeah, pretty bad, actually. For some reason, we seem to play them every 3 years. I don't know if that's on purpose, just the way the schedule works out. But, yep, we are playing the Houston Texans, not in the friendly confines of Acrisure Stadium. We got to go down there, down to Houston. Right there. It's a huge stadium. Take a look at this thing, man. People have mixed feelings about NRG Stadium. That's what they call it this week. I'm not a big fan of domes, but just like Vegas, at least they open it occasionally. Vegas, they play on grass. Texas, Houston, they went to this weird artificial turf lately. You know how I feel about that. Nonetheless, the Steelers are playing there. We haven't lost to Houston since 2011. I like to keep it that way. So this is going to be a rough game. Steelers are 2-1 first place. Houston's 1-2. But they, even though they lost a couple of games, they've been close. And this is the reason why. The new rookie quarterback, they threw him in first game, trial by fire. He's doing pretty good, C.J. Stroud. Even though they're 1-2, like I said, this guy is the real deal. Their defense needs some work. On offense, wow, this guy is ripping teams to pieces. I don't think he realizes in the NFL quite yet, but there he is. He still thinks that Ohio State destroying everybody. And, well, so far the illusion seems to be holding. So if we can get this guy, we can win the game. You know what I say? You knock him down so he can't throw the ball. If he's down on his back, can't throw, and he can't run. That's why we need this guy again, right? T.J. Watt, his older brother used to play for the Houston Texans for the longest time. So maybe we'll start giving some people some flashbacks. I want to see how many people show up with Watts jerseys. But T.J. Watt is turning into a real monster. I mean, this guy is incredible. He had a couple sacks against the Raiders. He's already the Steelers' all-time leading sacker. This guy might take the NFL record by the end of next week, the way this guy's moving. So we need you again, man. Just get used to hearing that. Need you again. Might not need you to score this time. Just keep sacking C.J. Stroud. We'll be okay. So on offense, Steeler triplets. That's right. I'm bringing that term back. I think we got a triplet here. We've got George Pickens over there catching passes, number 14. We've got Kenny Pickett throwing the passes to him. It's going to be a quarterback, and there's our running back, Najee Harris. He had kind of a so-so game against the Raiders. Our running game is still kind of hasn't really gained traction yet, but it's starting to get there. We saw a little bit, never had a chance against San Francisco. Started moving a little bit against the Browns and against the Raiders too. Moved the ball little by little. He's averaging less than 4 yards a carry, but those hard yards, 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, the stuff that keeps the drive going and bringing the clock down. If we get that average per carry up to about 4 or so, yeah, now we're going to be unstoppable. So Steeler offense is getting there. It's starting to wake up, man. Little by little, inch by inch, we are going to get there. So, hey, I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend. Whatever happens, have a great time. Keep it safe and go forth and conquer. I will see you next week. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Point out my many, many errors down in the comments. And I'll be happy to learn, or at least pretend to. Have a great day. See you later. Das vidanya.